all our hearts, and that's part of the problem. It's our hearts get in the way of doing what we know our heads say we need to do. And that's when it comes to really setting limits with our kids. And such a simple word, no, that gives the adults so much difficulty, but yet our kids, that's probably one of the first words they learn to say. After mama and dada, they say no. And there's a reason for that, because no is a word that is not, as adults begin to experience it, as a word that means I'm rejecting somebody or somebody's idea. But for a child, no means I'm not you, I'm different. And no is a way, as one can use it in terms of setting boundaries, as a way to say, I am me, and helping me develop who I am separate from you, different from you. So when our child continues to say no, it's not to be obstreperous, it's not to be obstinate, it is to oppose, and it is to oppose what the adults come down in terms of saying, this is what you have to do, and the child typically will say no, and leaves the adults thinking, okay, now what? Tonight we're going to hear a lot more about what no means, how to say it, and the importance of being able to set limits with our children. Now, I also want you to know that I will be doing talking, but I want you to be able to interrupt me if there are any questions you have, any thoughts or comments. I want this to be engaging. I don't want me to be up here just kind of espousing a lot of information, but I want this to be a give and take. Parents, it is probably the hardest job we'll ever do, and yet in being a parent, there are no courses that are mandated, and it's the only job where there are no courses that are mandated, but we're just supposed to have the child and become the parent. And what we learn in terms of being a parent is typically either what we've experienced in our own growing up, in terms of what our own parents did with us, and we either liked it or didn't. So we either adopt it or reject it. Or we learn about being a parent in terms of what we read or what we experience right on the job in terms of working with our kids. And none of that may be really what is best in terms of your relationship with your child, in terms of who your child is. So being able to begin to understand what it means to not only be a parent, but in becoming a parent. Before our children are born, we have all these imaginations, what we imagine our child to be. We imagine typically that our child, the baby, is going to be coming into this world, is going to be joyful and delightful and just a bundle of sweetness. And that's a piece of it, but it's not all of it. And then we soon learn that this wonderful bundle of joy is up all night long and is not sleeping, or maybe sleeping for a couple of hours here, and this is not just maybe for a week or two. This could go on with many children for many weeks, and some for many months. And I've heard stories even longer than many months. And parents are blurry-eyed in the morning, if there's a morning that really comes about, and are needing to get on with their lives. And this little bundle of joy isn't cooperating. And then we try to feed this little bundle of joy, and we try to get our babies on schedules. And those schedules sometimes aren't in line with what our baby is really wanting or needing. And then we see the parents who are really trying to get food into the baby's mouth, and we have all these games, and we're airplanes, and we're going zoom, and we get right to the baby's mouth, and the baby turns its head away, or shuts their mouth. And we're there saying, but we're playing all these wonderful games. Why isn't he or she cooperating? And it goes on and on. So what we imagine oftentimes in terms of what our child is going to be like is not the reality in terms of what the real child is. And that difference between our imagining and the reality is what needs to be reconciled in terms of being able to help our child become who he or she is going to be in terms of developing a really strong sense of self, but at the same time being able to be socialized and act in socially responsible ways. What is it that we want for our kids? If we just kind of open this up and you think about what it is that you want for your children. Anybody?
I say like successful friendships.
Okay,
like
friendships.
Yeah.
All right. What else?
To be happy.
Be happy. Absolutely. We want them to be happy. What else do we want for our kids?
To be patient.
To be patient. Yes. To be patient. Mm-hmm.
Be kind.
To be kind. Uh-huh.
Well, the first one, the self-esteem, that's,
Yes.
you want them to feel good about who they are.
To feel really good about themselves. To feel confident in who they are. To be able to have, as you said, really positive relationships, whether it's with friends or siblings or family, with people in general. To be successful in their interactions with others. To be able to have a real strong kind of sense of character and morality. And also, oftentimes, I hear to be able to really be successful academically, to really do well, to really have that edge up in terms of being able to be at school and really attend, concentrate, absorb, and really learn, and learn well. One of the things that happens often is that, given the fact, and speaking with thousands of parents over the years, one of the most common responses that I hear is that you all love your kids. You all love them. You care, you're concerned, you want the best for them. And this is what we're hearing about a little bit about right now. But what I've also learned is that over the course of time, love is not enough. Because when our children start to really act up and are really challenged and are really pushing our buttons, our love isn't making it work in terms of what we're trying to get our kids to do. And what I have heard over the years too and have learned is that parents' own attitudes and beliefs about their own emotions and the emotions of their children get in the way of being able to deal with kids when emotions run hot. And that is a problem that many parents end up having, and this is part of what makes limit setting so difficult, is that when emotions start running hot, you don't know what to do. And that is one of the things that we're going to learn about this evening, is what to do when these emotions start boiling up, and we need to respond in ways that are going to be helpful to our children, and in ways that are going to allow them to develop an autonomy, but also a way to engage appropriately with others. And what a lot of the research does talk about is that when we're able to help our children develop these skills of being able to deal appropriately with their emotions, to be able to express them in constructive ways, to be able to manage the intensity of their emotions, that when we can help our children develop these skills, what ends up happening is that these children become successful all the way through their life. They become successful not only in terms of who they are, but they become successful in terms of their interactions with others, and also become very successful in learning, in academics. And we'll hear more about this as we go on. One of the things we want to keep in mind all through the evening is that when we're building a strong foundation, you know, thinking about like the 3 little pigs and, you know, each little pig in terms of trying to build their house, realized eventually that unless the house was built out of strength and a really strong structure, that the elements around, the stresses and the challenges, were going to break the house down. And what we want to learn is how do we keep this house, our house, your house, strong, so that when your children are going to be pushing against you, and that's part of their job, when they're going to be pushing against you, what do you need to do in order to be able to keep the house strong, the foundation strong, and your child and you continuing to move forward in the best possible way. Remembering these three things. Your child develops in the context of a relationship. Your child learns through observing you, through imitating you, sometimes better for worse, whatever, but they do. They also learn through your guidance, through your coaching, and through the example you set in terms of how you react to them. And in that way, they develop these patterns themselves of reacting and interacting with others. You as a parent are going to be holding up a mirror to your child. And what that means is that your child doesn't know the impact or the effect they have in terms of their behavior on others unless they get feedback, and feedback from you. So that it's really important as a parent to be able to metaphorically hold up that mirror and say, you know, Johnny, when you are pushing your friend, that doesn't feel good, and that's not going to make your friend want to be your friend anymore. There are better ways to get your friend to want to play with you. Now, Johnny doesn't know that unless we give Johnny that feedback that that's not working and why it's not working. So holding up a mirror to our kids, helping them begin to understand the impact their behavior has on others, on you, and other people is going to be really important. And the third thing for us to keep in mind is that in order to be effective in doing all of these things with our children, we also have to be effective in terms of being aware of our own emotions and really holding up the mirror to ourselves and allowing ourselves to become aware of what we're feeling. And when we're feeling certain things, and we all have all those feelings, as do our children, happy, joyful, angry, sad, mad, afraid, anxious, we have them all, as do our children. Our children are not born with just having joyful feelings, as much as we want to believe that. Children also have the whole range of emotion. And when we can become aware of our own emotions and what we do with them, it's going to help us understand the messages we're giving to our children. Because again, if we go back to the first thing, that children develop in the context of a relationship, they're watching us. So that if we are anxious or we go from 0 to 100 like this, that's what they're going to learn. Okay, when something isn't feeling good, we're going to go from 0 to 100 like this. This is what you do. So it's really important for us, as much as we can, to try to be aware of our own emotions. And part of what can help us do that is the relationship we have with our significant other, in terms of being there to be able to give each other feedback in terms of what it is that we're doing that is really wonderful and that's really working, and what we may be doing that ain't so wonderful and it's not working so well. And not only with our children, but the way we interact also ends up with our relationships in terms of our significant others. So tonight we're going to be talking not only about how we respond to our children, but how we respond to emotions or feelings in general, and the messages we give to one another and to our kids, and if they're working or if they're not working, and how can we do it in the best possible way. Okay, what's your mission? Our mission as parents. It's to help our kids, as many of you were talking about, really develop a very strong sense of self, confidence, security, resilience, as well as surviving the daily struggles of getting our kids to behave in socially responsible ways. And that's a challenge, and it's a rub in allowing our kids to become who they are, and to push, and to grow, and to explore, and to experiment, like they get up on the couch and they want to feel what it feels like to jump up and down on the couch. And you're saying, what are you doing? Get off that couch. Or if your child sees a big red crayon, i.e. your red lipstick, and they get a hold of the big red crayon, your lipstick, and they have a big white wall in front of them, what a great place to start doing artwork. And they take the big red lipstick, and they start drawing all over the wall because they want to be creative. You come in and you scream, "Oh my God, what are you doing?" These kinds of things, that's the rub. When a child is trying to be creative and do their, quote, their own thing, and as a parent, our job is to try to get them to be appropriate in their creativity, in their exploration. As I said, parenting is the hardest job we'll ever do. Limit setting is the biggest challenge as parents that we have. There is no parent over the years that I have ever spoken with, including myself, that hasn't been challenged when it comes time to setting limits. Because it really gets us, not just in terms of what we know, but it gets us in terms of what we feel in our heart. And how sometimes can you look at this adorable little child when you have just gotten angry and they turn to you with this beautiful smile and they say, let me give you an example. I came home one night from work stressed out, and my son at the time was about 3 and a half, and he's taking his cars and he's taking them and he's driving the cars on the coffee table. And I was really challenged that night in terms of work and whatever, and so I was not as patient as I should have been. And I said, Jonathan, that is not okay. Stop taking your cars and driving them around on the coffee table. Take your car and drive it on the floor. So he continued to do the coffee table, and I started to get really angry. And then, next thing I knew, he wasn't around. And I'm in the course of making dinner, and I turn around and I see a portrait face down under the table, a picture face down. And I go and I look at the picture, I turn it over, and I see it's one of my son's favorite pictures of him and me together, and he has it face down on the floor. So I go into his room and I say, John, I see you have something on the floor under the table. Do you want to tell me about it? And he said, yeah. He said, that's my picture of you and me, and I don't want to look at it anymore. And I said, why? And he said, because I'm really mad. And I said, okay. I said, why are you so mad? Because you kept yelling and yelling at me. He said, I heard you. You kept yelling. And then I said to him, you know, Jonathan, you're right. I said, I've had a really tough day. What you were doing, I didn't like, and I told you I didn't have to keep repeating myself, but I did because I had a really tough day. I'm sorry, and I took it out on you. Okay, next night I come home, and he's taking his cards and he's driving and he's going over on the table. And I said, Jonathan, stop it. That's not okay. Take it and go on, and take your car and go on the floor. So he leaves again, and then he comes back and he says, Mommy, I know you had a tough day at work. And I said, no, Jonathan, I didn't. I'm angry because of what you're doing now. So children really get to know us. They get to press our buttons. They listen to what we're saying, and they use it in the best possible way in terms of getting what they want to have happen. So we have to be really aware and listen to ourselves in terms of what we do. Okay. Imagine this. You're 1-year-old. You're in the mall. The 1-year-old is in the carriage, and you're pushing your child along the mall, and your child starts to scream and yell, and everybody's turning around. And you're there, and they're screaming and yelling, and they're kicking. They want to get out of the carriage, and there's no way to get them out of the carriage at this point. Your 2-year-old wants a cookie before lunch, and you tell them, no, you can't have a cookie. And they want a cookie, and they start crying and having a major temper tantrum and throwing themselves on the floor because they want the cookie. Your 3-year-old, you pick up from a play date at one of your friend's house, and they're not ready to leave. And you say, come on, we have to go. And they don't want to go. And they start screaming and yelling in front of your friends. And you're sitting there and you're thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do? Your 4-year-old, you're having a holiday dinner party, and your relatives are coming, and you tell your 4-year-old, you know, Auntie is coming, and Grandma is coming, and we're going to have a really nice dinner tonight, and when they come to the door, I want you to smile, say hello, and so forth. The doorbell rings, you open the door, and it's your mother-in-law. And your daughter is standing there, and looks up, looks down, and walks away. Okay, what are we doing? These things happen all the time. And these are situations that leave us as parents in a quandary. Okay, how do I respond to my child to get them to do what is appropriate? What makes limit setting so hard? Oftentimes, it's because we're afraid we're going to get the negative reaction from our child. That when we set a limit, our child isn't going to like it and is going to respond negatively. Or we sometimes have too little time to spend with our kids. So when we are with our children, at those times, the last thing we want to do is to start setting limits with them. Because there's so little time we get. And at nighttime, instead of having them get into their pajamas or brush their teeth, they want to stay up. And you're thinking, oh, I haven't seen them all day. Let them stay up. What's the big deal? Differing expectations among you and your spouse. You think one thing, your spouse thinks something else. And those differing expectations makes it really hard to have a united front and communicate in a united way, effectively, what it is you want your child to be able to do. And your child knows that, and what do children do? When they see Mommy is saying one thing, Daddy is saying another, they say, yay! And it's their opportunity to divide and conquer. And that's typically what happens. Or it could be your own discomfort or our own discomfort in handling our child's anger or their distressing feelings, or handling our own anger. These are all things that get in the way of being able to set limits. We want our kids to love us, of course, and our kids want us to love them. Sometimes we confuse being loved with loving what we do. And there are two different things. Your children will always love you, even though they may say, I hate you. They will always love you, but they may not love what you do, particularly when you're doing something they don't want. But that's part of having to set a limit. They'll get over it. Okay, so tonight we're going to talk about how to set limits with our kids that are going to really pave the way for lifelong success, and how parents can learn to manage their own emotions in ways that really help you deal with your own frustrations. What limit setting really does is it really helps your child to organize and regulate their own emotions and how they behave. It helps them to develop self-control. It also helps them to be more successful in relating and in relationships. Many of the things you were talking about in terms of your aspirations for children, for your kids, limit setting is something that helps your children achieve those aspirations that you have for them. What is limit setting? Oftentimes, parents don't really understand what limit setting is. What it is, it's really creating appropriate boundaries. Parents are the definers. You are the definers of boundaries. And you define boundaries by either a yes or a no. No divides, separates, and yes unites. And both of those words have very important meaning and are really necessary when it comes time to setting boundaries. Limit setting also is a restriction of an activity you feel is harmful to your child or harmful to somebody else, or behavior that's just not socially acceptable. And the last thing is you do for your child what your child is not yet ready to do for themselves. Your child lacks the understanding of consequences for their behavior until we start to impose them. And then they start to learn. When I hit somebody, it's not okay, because then I am told what I did was wrong or bad, or I can see that mommy or daddy have a mad face. So they begin to see what they do and the response and the reaction their behavior has by how you respond to them. So if you want them to stop doing something that is not appropriate, you need to respond to them in a way where they learn that that behavior is not okay. Limit setting, what it's not about punishment. And oftentimes parents confuse setting limits with punishing a child. Punishing a child is when you take something away from the child. Limit setting is done in terms of setting boundaries for a child, teaching a child right from wrong, what is okay and what's not okay, which is very different than a punishment. We impose punishments when limit setting doesn't work. And it's not about the adult being the boss. It's not about because I said so. How many times do we remember in our own childhood, our own parents saying something to us that we didn't want to do, and we say, but why? And they say, because I said so. And what did that do to us? It made us want to dig our heels in a little bit deeper and a little bit longer because it felt so unfair. And it felt that what is then creates the power struggle. It's win, lose. Someone's winning, i.e. in that situation, the parent, and the child feels like they're losing. And that's a horrible feeling to have. And it's not about doing something where our child is going to hate us. Again, what I said before, they're going to hate what we do because they don't want to be restricted from what they're wanting to do, but they're not going to hate you. Limit setting, again, is about creating appropriate boundaries. It's about helping children become autonomous, become their own person, a really strong sense of self, regulating their emotions and behaviors, which is critical, and understanding the appropriate behavior and feeling in control. When do we start limits? From the very beginning. And we start it when the baby is needing to get on some kind of a schedule. And whether it is a sleeping schedule or an eating schedule, if we didn't try to get our babies on schedules, oftentimes what would happen is the baby would be sometimes wanting to eat every hour. Or they get their nights and their days confused, and they're up all night and they're sleeping all day. So we start by setting boundaries and limits with our babies. We put up gates because we don't want our babies to get hurt or to fall down some stairs or to get into something that's not safe. We put up those safety locks. Those are the beginning of setting limits. When children get to be a little bit older, the preschoolers, we set more behavioral fences in terms of what is okay and what isn't. So setting limits starts from day one. And again, it's helping our children begin to learn what is okay, what isn't okay, and how to begin to connect cause and effect. Why is this so important? I don't know if any of you know about this Marshmallow Experiment, but this experiment happened back in 1960, and it was done at Stanford. And it was a stunning experiment that really looked at children, 4-year-olds' desire for instant gratification. And what they did was they took probably about a group of 12 4-year-olds, and they took them one by one, and they gave them a choice. And the choice was they could have a marshmallow now. They could have one marshmallow now. But if they waited for a little bit, when the researcher left to go do an errand, and when the researcher came back, they could have 2 marshmallows. And it was the child's choice. You could have one now, or you could have 2 when I come back if you wait. So they filmed all of this, and what ends up happening is that there were a group of kids from these 12 children that went into group A. They didn't wait. They couldn't wait. They just, the minute the person left, they took the marshmallow and they started to eat it. And then there were several other children that waited because they wanted 2 marshmallows, and they waited till the researcher came back. that wasn't what was so stunning about this experiment. What was so stunning was they followed these children for 18 years. And what they found 18 years later is that the group B that waited, they found 18 years later that they were more motivated, they were more confident, they were able to delay gratification, they were more positive, they were able to persist in the face of difficulty and challenge, and they scored 210 points higher on their SATs. And they paid, got higher paying jobs and better relationships, and they were in better health. And what the experiment demonstrated was the importance of self-control. And when a child is able to establish internal controls, establish self-control, all these other things are able to happen for them, because being able to be in control is just gets involved in everything we do, from being able to pay attention, to listening, to being able to sit still in terms of learning in school, and to be able to manage and deal with our emotions. And when we're able to do that, all that energy that is used up when we're anxious or we're worried is all freed up. And when that energy is freed up, we can use it to attend and concentrate and absorb learning in terms of what's going on around us. Now, what is critical, too, in terms of what research is talking about, is that the old news is that emotions drive behavior. Without emotions, we wouldn't be getting involved in certain things that we do. It's being excited about something, being curious about something, being angry or upset. It's our emotions that's behind everything that we do. That's the old news. What the new news is, and what research is starting to show, is that there is a direct link between emotions and learning. And that is really important. And what I was about to say was that what a lot of research now in neuroscience is showing is that the brain continues to develop into our 20s, but there is a very sensitive period of time within the first 4 years of a child's life where they refer to that as neuroplasticity. And what that means is that a child's day-to-day experiences both at home and at school can absolutely impact and shape the circuitry within the brain, because the brain is very malleable and impressionable during this very sensitive period of time. And when it can actually impact and shape the circuitry, what they find is that it impacts the prefrontal cortex, which is the home, the house for executive functioning. And executive functioning includes attention, concentration, memory, impulse control, decision-making, problem-solving, all those critical skills that are fundamental for learning and success all the way through life. So when children are able to develop these skills in terms of being able to manage and deal with their emotions in effective ways and be able to become sensitive to the emotions of others, that these critical skills in terms of becoming more emotionally competent impacts children's ability to learn and attend and be able to do much better, because that energy, again, is available to absorb and take in what's going on around them. And that's one of the main things we try to do here with children, and that's what the teachers are doing all the time, is helping your children begin to not only recognize what they're feeling, and that all feelings are fine, it's what we do with them that really matters, and then how to communicate and express them in effective and constructive ways, not destructive ways, but also how to begin to deal with and manage the intensity of the emotions they feel and become sensitive to the emotions of others. And when children can begin to do this, they are able and available to problem solve and deal with the challenges that they face on a day-to-day basis. Emotions are central in all relationships and all learning. Emotions are central in how we negotiate, how we compromise, how we resolve conflicts, learning, and also in our expectations. And as I was saying a moment ago, that when a child can understand, manage, and master their emotions, there's a much greater capacity for energy and attention for learning, problem solving, and for grasping new ideas. So if you see those little pie charts, you can see that when there's more anxiety and stress, there's that much that's available for learning, but when that anxiety and stress, it never goes away, we still have some, and some can be very helpful and motivating, that there's much more availability of energy for learning. Okay, what is the job of our kids? The job of our kids is to push against us. The job of our kids is to become autonomous, and becoming autonomous, becoming separate, is by pushing against what we want, because what we want is what we want, what they want is separate from that, and the only way they can become autonomous is by pushing against us. And how does this get expressed? It gets expressed in their play, and it gets expressed by what they say, and also in their behavior. So how do we as parents learn to guide and teach and model for our kids so that they can better understand and regulate their emotions? By letting our kids do things on their own, by letting them wrestle with their own problems, and by learning from their own mistakes, and by setting limits. Because all of this is helping our children begin to understand that they are able and competent to do things. Now when a child is trying to get their coat on, and we're in a rush, so we say, let me do that for you. Well, that's one way to get them out the door and to get us on to what we need to do. But what is the message we're giving our child when we do that? Versus when the child is trying to get their coat on and we say, you know, you're really struggling, I can see this is really hard for you, but we give them 5 more minutes to do it, we give them a little extra time, and then they do it, and they are so proud and they're so excited, look what I did. And oftentimes parents will come in the morning, and or pickup time, and they'll see their kids, they're putting on their own jackets, and say, they don't do that for me at home. How do you get them to do this? Children are a lot more capable of doing things when we give them the space and the support and the confidence to do it. And it may take a little longer at the beginning, but in the long run, it is much more worthwhile because then they start doing it, and the message we're then giving them is we know you can do it. It may take a little bit longer, but we know you can do it. And giving our children the message, we know you can do it, is a really important message, because when they know that we feel they can do it, then they are much more wanting and willing to try to do it on their own. The problem comes when there's a clashing of agendas. Again, our kids are wanting to become separate, independent by exploring, and we want them to obey us. And our role is in helping to foster and encourage their independence while having to have them behave in socially appropriate ways. So there's a rub here. Parents want their kids to do what the kids don't want to do. We want them to put on their mittens. We want them to brush their teeth. We want them to get into bed. We want them to wash their hands. We are stopping kids from doing what they want to do, which is climbing on the furniture, which is scaling the walls, which is putting beads in their nose and their ears. All those kinds of things that they want to do, we're stopping them from doing. One way when they're wanting to kind of jump on the sofa, instead of saying just get down, it's I know you're wanting to jump, it's not okay to jump on the sofa because it's not safe. Let's think of another way we can do this. What's something else you can jump on that would be safe? And trying to engage your child in coming up with another idea, and if they're just kind of looking and they're not sure, what if we take one of your pillows from your room and we put the pillow on the floor and you can jump up and down on the pillow. Let's try that. That way, when you're closing the door on an inappropriate behavior, such as you're not wanting them to jump on the couch, you open the door on a more appropriate behavior. You're seeing that they want to jump, so what is a way they can jump and be safe? The meltdown. The child's attitude is I'll do what I want, and the parent's attitude is you'll do what I say. and there is the rub. And then comes temper tantrum. What do when your child is in the midst or throws a temper tantrum, and it's not just at home, but you're at the supermarket, or you're at your mother-in-law's, or you're at school and you're trying to get off to work? What do? One of the first things you do is you just want to make sure your child is safe. So you want to make sure that they're in a space where if they're flailing about, they're not going to hurt themselves or somebody else. And then you wait. And you wait by first telling your child, I can't help you with the problem right now because you're not hearing me. You're screaming, you're not hearing me, so I can't help you. I will help you, and I'm here to help you when you gain control, when you stop screaming and you gain control. And then I'm here to help you, but you can't listen to me when you're like this, and I can't hear you. So when you can gain control, I am here to help you. The message you're giving your child there is, you know they can gain control. And trust me, this really does work. When you give that message to your child, you know they can gain control, and you're not getting anything until you do, because there's no way I can hear the problem to help you resolve the problem. But when you do, I'm here to help you resolve the problem. And you show your child that you empathize. You know they're angry, I know you're mad, and I know it feels horrible. But again, I'm here to help you when you get your body back in control. And then you begin to help your child label what they're feeling. You're mad because you're not able to get your doll from Grandma's house. We forgot it, and you're really upset that you don't have it. Well, what is another thing we can get right now? But engaging, again, your child, understanding that in the midst of a temper tantrum is not the time to try to start negotiating with them until your child is regained control, and then you can communicate with them. There is a direct connection between how kids feel and how they behave. When kids feel right, they're going to behave right. So how do we help our kids feel right? By accepting and acknowledging their feelings. Why is it so difficult for us to accept their feelings? We have a hard time accepting our kids' negative feelings. We want our kids to be happy. I mean, that's one of the things we said at the beginning of this evening. We want our kids to be happy. It's really hard when our child is not happy. Oftentimes parents will say, well, if I accept their feelings, won't that give them the idea that it's okay with me in terms of what they're doing? No, because accepting our child's feelings is not the same thing as accepting their behavior. It's totally different. An example is the child says, I don't like the new baby. And as a parent we say, yes you do. Or the child says, I hate you. And the parent says, no you don't. These are things that are happening all the time when our child is saying one thing and we say another. So how do we do this? How do we accept their feelings? By listening to what they're feeling. By acknowledging, yeah, you're really having a hard time. I understand that this is really hard for you. However, what you want is not okay because it's not safe. When somebody is feeling really upset, think of yourself. You're really upset, something happened at work or with a friend or with a relative, and you're really angry about it, anxious about it, upset about it. You come home to your significant other, your spouse, and you start talking about it, and your partner says, what are you getting so upset about? There's no reason to be so upset about this. What does that do to us? It's like, what, are you kidding? And so typically we shut down as a reaction to that, or we may walk away, or we say under our breath, you just don't get it. Versus when our partner says, yeah, I can understand, that was really a horrible thing to happen. I can really understand how you feel about that. I really do. Now, the partner isn't there to fix it for you, But just to understand what it is that you're feeling makes a world of difference in terms of calming you down. Because when you feel understood, the anxiety and the tension that you're feeling starts to lessen because you feel a connection then. You feel that you're not alone. And that's what happens with children. And it's not that you are agreeing with them, and it's not that you are giving them what they want, it's that you're telling them, I get it, I understand this is really hard, but we can't do this because it's not safe. They're much more able to accept the limits when they feel understood. My turtle is dead. He was alive this morning. Now don't get so upset, honey. Don't cry. It's only a turtle. Child starts crying more and more. Stop that. I'll buy you another turtle. I don't want another turtle. Now you're being unreasonable. How familiar does this sound? And I'll turn it away. My turtle is dead. He was alive this morning. Oh no. What a shock. He was my friend. To lose a friend can hurt. I taught him to do tricks. You two had fun together. I fed him every day. You really cared about that turtle. What happens to this child in this scenario? By just understanding, acknowledging her feelings, it gets her to open up more, it gets her to talk more, and it reduces the intensity of what she's feeling. And she calms down. This really works. When we set firm limits with our kids, it's giving them a message. And the message is, we know you can wait. We know you can wait. It teaches them to delay gratification, and it also helps them to tolerate the intensity of their feelings in terms of developing self-regulation and self-control. And we just heard about how important these capacities are in terms of their success all the way through life. It doesn't happen the first time you try it. I don't know how many times parents often come to me, many times in my practice, and they say, we've done everything. Nothing works. And so we start talking about it. Yes, they have tried everything 1 or 2 times. And it's been really hard for them to stay with it and repeat it over and over again, because how children learn is not by just doing it once, because they don't want it. So by just doing it one time, it's not something that necessarily is going to sink in, and the next time they do it, they're angels. It's going to take practice, because the way mastery develops is through repetition. So even though it's going to take more work at the beginning, they're going to get it, and it's going to be far less work further on and down the road. It's a process. And again, as we've been talking, it's listening to what the problem is, it's acknowledging their feelings, it's identifying, giving them a name to the feeling, it's clarifying with reasons. Children need reasons. It's not enough to say, because I'm the boss, because I said so. When you're doing something that you don't want a child to do, you're telling them something, you have to tell them why. Because it's not safe, as an example. And you resolve with choices. When a child is given a choice, the child feels that they are participating, they feel responsible, and they feel like they have control. Even though you're framing the choice, by framing the choice for them, by saying the child doesn't want to put on their mittens to go outside, and you say, you know, you can put on your mittens by yourself, or I can help you. It's cold outside. What's your choice? Do you want to do it by yourself, and I know you can do it, or do you need my help? You decide. And when you present the framed choice to your child's going to make a choice. And they're going to feel like, I did it, not you. Another really good example, and you know, the examples I like to give because it kind of resonates for us, and this is for a child that may be a little bit older. They want a cookie, okay? And you don't want them to have the cookie before lunch, okay? But they're insisting, I want a cookie, I want a cookie. So for a little child, that's not ready to start kind of discerning, you know, start making decisions about A versus B, you can say, you can't have it before lunch, but you can have it after lunch, because I don't want you to spoil your appetite. Or, for a child that's a little bit older, like maybe a 4-year-old, they want a cookie, you can say, okay, you get one cookie today. I'm gonna give you that cookie, and you decide when you wanna eat it, but you get one cookie. If you've ever done this with a child, it's amazing what comes up in terms of very creative solutions that these children develop. Oftentimes what the child does is maybe the first day they eat the cookie when they want, and that's fine. Then the next, but later on in the afternoon they say, I want another cookie. No, you only get one cookie for the day. You chose to eat it before lunch. Maybe tomorrow you may make a different choice. The next day you give the child a cookie, and the child realizes, gee, I want it after lunch too. They break it in half. And they have half the cookie before lunch, and they save half the cookie for after. But then, as you go on and on, they may decide to be more creative and break it up into lots of little pieces, so they end up making that one cookie last the whole day. But that's their choice, but they're still getting one cookie. There are 10 commandments in limit setting, and it's really important we pay attention to them. It has to be age appropriate, because setting a limit for a baby, a 1-year-old, is very different than setting a limit for a 4-year-old. So we have to take into account children's attention span, what is really meaningful at their age, what isn't, and we really have to not make everything a crime and not make everything a battle. We have to choose our battles and choose them carefully. It has to be situation appropriate, and to remember it's intended to guide and help, not insult or shame or create really an undue difficulty for the child. And there's a difference between being firm and being hostile. It's okay to be firm, and it's okay to show our children that we're angry. And oftentimes parents don't think that that's an okay thing to do, but it's really okay, because how else are our children going to know that they can show their anger and they can show it in appropriate ways, and that's okay, but it's not okay to use our anger and hurt somebody with it. The united front, that is really important, because if you and your partner aren't together on it, the first thing your child is going to do is divide and conquer, and that just makes things escalate and makes things much worse. And they have to be reasonable and clear. Consistency. It's really important that you're consistent when we say something, that it's really important that we remain consistent with what we're saying and we follow through. And the last thing in terms of consequences, as we talk about cause and effect, that there are consequences we have to give our kids, but when we're closing the door on an inappropriate behavior, that is, there's a picture of it there are puppets and dolls, and there are these rules. And these rules are, first they have to talk about what the problem is, then they have to express how they feel, they have to listen to understand what their friend is saying, and then they have to think about ways to solve the problem, choose the best plan, and follow through. I think that's the alarm.
It's not working. Sorry.
Okay.
They're down there trying to get it.
All right.
Sorry about that.
So this is what we have children do, and when children are working these problems out, they feel very successful, they feel confident, they feel that any challenge they have, that there is a way to deal with it. Oftentimes parents will be coming in the next day and they will say, you know, me and my wife or me and my husband got into a tiff last night, and Tommy came up to us and said, you know, Mom and Dad, if you guys go to the peace table, you'll be able to work this out. And the parents say, so tell me about this peace table. This becomes really important to the children, because it's what they are learning as a way to be able to allow them to deal with challenges that they have all the time, and that there are ways to work out, no matter what the challenge is, there are ways to work it out. Okay. Encouraging participation. Instead of, when our child is running around the supermarket, you're acting like a wild animal, no TV for tonight. Another way is to say, point out a way that would be helpful, is to say, it would be helpful if you picked up 3 big lemons for us tonight. Getting them to participate in what you're doing makes them feel, oh my gosh, you know, I have something to do, and it makes them feel responsible, and they feel very proud of the fact that, boy, now they can pick out the lemons too. They have something to do. Or giving choices. Dressing can be a nightmare. How often when your child wants to wear a tutu to school instead of pants, or a bathing suit instead of a sweatshirt and pants because it's the winter time, or they decide they want to wear stripes and polka dots together. So one way of dealing with that is, again, giving choices, and you say, are you in the mood for your gray pants or your red pants? There's no tutu in that choice. Or the child doesn't want to have breakfast. They don't want to drink their milk. So another way of dealing with that is saying, would you like a half a glass of milk or juice or a whole glass? You have a choice. You can have half a glass or a whole glass. What would you like? You're at the playground or at someone's house and the child doesn't want to leave. A way to respond to that is say, we're leaving in 5 minutes. Do you want to go on the slide one more time or on the swing? What is your choice? You have a choice. You can choose the slide or the swing. You will be surprised that this is really effective and it really does work. Okay, then there's parenting styles. It comes to us. And we're all different, and we all have very different styles. But what is important is listening with a third ear in terms of what our children are saying. And to listen to ourselves, too, in terms of what we're feeling. And to think about what do we feel when we are feeling in control and relaxed. For some, rules are followed and everything is in place. That's when they feel more in control and more relaxed. You know, they have a very set system and they're following the rules, and that's very comforting for them. For others, it is they feel when they're subjected to confrontation, that is something that makes them feel very anxious. So they stay away from confrontation. For others, when they're feeling more of a free spirit or more spontaneous, that's when they feel most in control and relaxed. Knowing what it is in terms of ourselves can really help in terms of knowing what we communicate to our kids. Because if we are the type that withdraws when we get upset or angry, what are we communicating to our kids when we do that? What we're doing is we're saying that some feelings or thoughts are best left ignored, not to be dealt with. When we get very anxious around confrontation, what are we communicating to our kids? We're communicating that there's something that's not safe. That when we are being confronted with something and we get really, really anxious about it, what our children are picking up is that when they feel our anxiety, they feel that something isn't safe. The same thing in terms of maybe dropping our kids off at school in the morning. If we're not feeling really comfortable with it because our child is acting up and we're feeling really anxious, when our child picks up our anxiety, it communicates to our kids that mommy or daddy isn't feeling safe about leaving me here, so I don't want to stay. Versus knowing that they're going to be fine as long as you feel that where they are is in a really, really good place, and you believe that, then, and you bring them and you're not feeling anxious, they'll pick that up and they will be fine. So it's really important in terms of being aware of what we do with our own feelings. And when we're over-controlling the message we're communicating to our children, when we have to have it our way all the time, the message we're communicating to our children is that their ideas don't matter. Okay, the Goldilocks Dilemma. Either being too hot or too cold, or just right. Too hot is when we say to our kids, I'm the boss, you must, you can't, because I said so, 1, 2, 3. That's when we are really being too hot. And the outcome of that typically is a power struggle. And the child will give up. And what ends up happening for a child when they're in that kind of a dynamic is the child becomes anxious, a follower, and this is a lot of research that's been done, and this is what the outcomes have shown. And they become an average to good student. When it's too cold, when your child is the boss, when you just kind of drop it, you forget it, you become indifferent to it, you don't want to struggle anymore, the outcome is it really interferes with a child establishing self-control because they're not really being taught that what they're doing in many instances is not okay, and they're getting away with whatever it is that they want to do because the struggle becomes too exhausting for the parent. And then the child is left not really being able to internalize the control that they really need to learn. And what happens for a child like this oftentimes is they become very frustrated very quickly, and it's hard for them to really become empathic, and they really end up being more of a poor to average student. The just right part is when we as parents are firm and we're able to reason with our kids and follow through and involve them in participating in solutions to problems or challenges that they're facing. You do it collaboratively. You know, we talked about the process, about listening and involving them with choices and with reasons and things of this sort. The child ends up being more self-motivated, more confident, responsible, more of a leader, and they become really more of an excellent student. Okay, so the cornerstone of being a successful parent, now it's important to understand that this is the hardest job ever going to do, is again becoming really aware of our kids' emotions, recognizing the emotions as an opportunity to relate and to teach, and by talking and sharing between and among one another. Being able to empathize and validate their feelings, and to be able to help them label and identify what they're feeling, accepting the reality and the need to set limits, and exploring strategies to problem solve. As I said, being the parent is the hardest job we'll ever do, but remember, success is getting it right only 51% of the time. If we can get it right 51% of the time, we're doing great. Now the last thing is, I want you to see, this is the Marshmallow Experiment, this is the video, so you can see what happened about teaching our kids about self-control. It's just a couple of minutes.
It's at the Edina Family Center. You can eat this marshmallow now. What do you mean that marshmallow? Just let me tell you to do it. So you can either eat it now, or wait until we come back and you'll get to. I want it too. Dr. David Walsh is a big fan of the original marshmallow test research. He wrote about it in his book, No, Why Kids of All Ages Need to Hear It and Ways Parents Can Say It. The genius of the experiment, however, was that they followed those children for 18 years. And the ability to wait for the second marshmallow was an amazingly strong predictor of their success in school, their adjustment, their happiness, even their popularity. What does it mean when a child does eat the marshmallow? You know, we're not predicting that any of these kids are going to be either good at self-discipline or not. What we really want to do is help parents try to figure out how can we help our kids develop more self-discipline, because we do know from a ton of research that that is a key success factor for kids, the ability to say no to themselves. Hi, Lily. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you, too. Lily gets the deal right away. When I come back, what am I going to have? Another marshmallow. In a room with few distractions, she waits. And waits. And waits. Long time for a 4-year-old. 15 minutes is a real long time. In the next room, Lily's mom watches with Dr. Walsh. She's lots of the plans coming up on dinner time. Lily surprises her mom, and even herself. I smelled the marshmallow. I thought I would eat it by boom. to give you the marshmallow? Absolutely, because that was the deal. Okay, very good.
Did you too much?
Of the 11 kids who took part, 4 ate the marshmallow within the first minute. Among them, 3.5-year-old Casey. Your mom and I are down to 1 year and now. You can either eat one or wait. That's whatever you decide is fine. Okay, very good. Casey kept his word. Okay, bye-bye, buddy. 11 seconds later, the marshmallow was destroyed. Now it's his twin brother Nathan's turn. So you can either have 1 or 2. It looks like Nathan wants to have his marshmallow and eat it too. For 15 minutes, he touches and licks the marshmallow. It's tempting to keep watching these kids with the marshmallow, but that's not what the story is really about. So licking times do to help the kids develop self-discipline. It's the kids' job to push against the limits. It's our job to set the limits. So we have to be consistent then, because I understand if you do this, then this is what's going to happen. Exactly. And once you don't do that, you don't follow through, then it's all over again, right? Exactly. Well, if I say no, you can't have the candy bar, and then 10 seconds later I'm giving you the candy bar, what they're learning is no doesn't mean no. No just means escalate, and I'll get what I want. It's simple, but not easy. Prior generations had a culture that supported the message of no. What's difficult today is that we have a culture that undermines the message. We have a culture that says more, fast, easy, fun. A culture that says eat the marshmallow. A short-term relief of giving kids what they want, we pay a long-term price for that. Turns out the agony of waiting for the marshmallow or a computer game or a car might actually help your child. We all know that life does deal challenge, frustration, and disappointment. But we want our kids to be able to handle that. Well, how will they be able to handle that if they don't get practice? Dr. Walsh says, in the marshmallow test and in life, you did, didn't you? And now good things come to those who can wait.
Please do not go home and test all of your children.
Right.
They need or not.
Are there any questions that people have?